Good morning. I want to do a little update. I'm laughing because I forgot I thought, man, I should have told this story. You're going to get two videos today. One that's going to be called Crow and Andy. I was just with guys yesterday and did a very short video just because I haven't had those two friends at one spot. But I was thinking this morning, and I wasn't going to talk about it, but sometimes I'm up praying. It's a very nice day. And then when I just turned the phone on, I had a text from my friend Crow, who you're going to see on the other video. And he's like, "Who's this?" And it reminded me of what I was laughing about. I was with my friends, and, I go see the friends at different houses, and, I never knew who's there. I never know what's going on. And, I just go, and whoever I run into, I run into. So Jimmy had a crowd of friends, people at the house, Jimmy's house, and so I know most of them, and they know I'm there. At first, I think they were uncomfortable because they didn't all know who I was. Because I remember some were like, last time, but then they might have heard, no, John, he's been helping us for years, and because they were real nice yesterday, some of the other people. So on the phone, Crow, I had text just now from yesterday. It says, "Who's this?" Because when I was there, my different friends, they're like, people are coming over today, they're certain names, they're on their way, and so who are they looking for? They're looking for this one, or they're coming for this one, and so when I was sitting there, my friend Crow was in his room with the door shut, and everybody else was outside, and I'd like to see my friend Crow. So I texted him when I'm sitting there in the house, and I just texted, "I'm here." Texting and phones, and as you see, I've had some experiences that I've talked about. You never know, if the tone is like, "I'm here," or, "Hey, I'm here." So when I texted my friend, "I'm here," thinking he'll know, because my name should show up. But then I found out he had a new phone, or he lost all the names, contacts. So a few minutes after I texted, like 5 minutes, he came out of the room fast, was going to go in the bathroom. And I said, "Hey, I'm here." "Hey, John." I said, "Didn't you get my text?" He said, "Oh, that was you." So I just realized, because people are telling, they're coming over looking for this one, they're going to get this one, and then you could take the text the wrong way, like, "Oh, I guess somebody's on the way." I was laughing. This is just an update that I do every so often. And we had the tragedy in the California San Bernardino shootings this week, okay? This is going to be one of the things that we're going to remember for a long time. So it's December of 2015 when whoever watches these videos, and it's the shooting that took place. And the whole, I heard some of the interviews. I do read a little bit of the various comments my friends make about different issues on the Facebook. I started reading them a little more. And so everybody has a view, and oftentimes both sides have good views. See, we're very polarized in this country, or people have this side and the other has this side. And you see it also in the media. So the liberal news media, the narrative or the story that they are telling right now is not so much it's a terrorism attack, which it was, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, but it's a gun issue is what they're saying. See, the availability of guns. And I found it just interesting as I listened to the news this week. They had on a FBI profiler, and they were discussing, they said, they tried to portray it as initially at least, as this is just a random gun violence thing or workplace violence. And so this profiler said, it's like one of the many mass shootings we've seen of crazy people at that point they were saying it's not terrorism, nothing, that we're not releasing the names or the fact that they're Muslims and they were radicalized. We know all that now. But the profiler was saying it's very amazing for us because most mass shooters are lone gunmen, and in this case, we have no idea what could have caused three people to have coordinated. It's just a new thing. It's going to be like a new thing in the history of mass shooting. But what she was defining, this FBI profiler, was actually what terrorism, what the whole thing is, which is people are uniting to do acts like this. That's why they join together. That's why people do. The caliphate is the idea of this radicalized Muslim state, which is now established, believe it or not, and that you work in coordination. So all of the questions this FBI profiler had about the shootings, there were only questions if your view of it was, this is not terrorism. This is just one of the other Tim McVeigh bombings or the random shootings in movie theaters. So from her view, it was just almost like a mystery how people could organize together to care. But it's not a mystery if you understand what radical Islam and the problem we're facing. So the liberal news media has been really portraying it as it's a gun problem. Now, though I'm not a very big critic of Obama or a big supporter of Obama, it is an amazing thing that during the week where they had the global warming big conference in Paris, and it was talked about as the major, danger, and it's all taking place at a time where sure enough we have not only the Paris ones that took place, but now we have this. And just to watch it is astounding. Now I heard one interview from somebody who said, just being interviewed, and said, what would cause this Muslim couple who had like a 6-month-old child to do such a thing? And the person was just off the street they interviewed, and he sincerely said, what would cause somebody to do an act of violence, knowing even in the act that their lives will be taken probably? And wow. And so because we as a country have not really looked at the issues of what are the issues, and some criticize, we don't need to know what the radical mindset thinks. We don't need to address anything in our own Western world to try to understand anything. And that's why people say we could never imagine how somebody can do something like that. Let me say, you hear me talk, please don't misunderstand me, but when you hear me talk about abortion, and I'm not connecting abortion with only in the sense you also have the radical shootings of people that are very upset about abortion. When I look at that issue that I've seen many, many years, and early on as a Christian, when I saw some actual pictures, it was from Keith Green's ministry, old Christian singer who passed away years ago, but he used to make little pamphlets, which we call tracts, and I used to use his pamphlets for our little ministry. He's a good singer, Keith Green, and I saw pictures of aborted babies for the first time, and they were in buckets. These are very real pictures. None of them are fake, and none of them are doctored, and it still goes on today. But they were actual babies burned and arms severed. And when I saw that, maybe in 1982 or 3, whenever I saw it early on, immediately I said there will never be a day where I would come to think, no matter all of the ways we try to convince people of various points of view, and I said I will never accept this as something that is a right thing to do or a freedom of choice issue. Or I said once I saw that. And so, and I bring that up to say, in my mind, when I see that one thing I just mentioned about the abortion, I also say to myself, how could anybody ever think that act, the developed babies and all of the dismemberment of these children that goes on, is going on. And we've covered it in a sense where we've tried to sanitize what goes on. And I also think, how can anybody ever think that that's a women's health issue? But John, Planned Parenthood, they provide other services. Look, they're the number one provider of abortion, which is a very, very terrible thing. Especially when you get into the late term like that. Fully formed babies, okay? I understand people have issues about all the other, but that itself. So when I heard the man say, how could anybody be so radicalized that they would have a child and him and his wife would die in a battle and all? It's because when all of history, and I'm not justifying what happened, of course not, but all of history is filled with people, groups of people, eventually becoming nations, who have decided that there are certain things that they will die for. Right, liberty, pursuit of happiness, freedom of conscience. All of history is contained with stories of people who decided, I see certain grievances, whether they be real or perceived. And I have now been convinced that the only solution to my grievances are have to take up arms. Now, that's why people do those things. That's why to pull the root out, to solve these types of long-standing problems we're going to face, is not going to be dealt with by simply killing people. That's why. Because when we as a people in our country decided we were going to have our own war of independence, we made a decision and we said it's worth dying for and killing for to have our freedom as a people. America. And so the radicalized mind, I'm not saying I agree with what they do, but I understand to a degree that they have seen long-standing issues that go beyond what we normally see in the media, that takes either the left position or the conservative right position. What we had was an act, obviously, of terrorism. And it's just amazing when I see, day by day, they had connections. And then the wife was probably radicalized the husband. And then all of this, and then making statements on Facebook, which they found out about, radical statements. And then it says, and the debate then becomes, but were they actually terrorists? Or was it just a homegrown thing? Yes, but the homegrown thing means this. People who are reading all of but they did have contact with people. They did even have contact with radicals. But besides all that, what's the definition, John, of terrorism? What's the definition of whether somebody's actually functioning alongside ISIS, or do they have particular, membership cards like unions and so forth? If people, even through the online media, become radicalized, that's terrorism. They've become persuaded and convinced of a certain cause. They become persuaded and convinced that the only way we can finally stop what they perceive as Western involvement and influence in their part of the world for many years, the only way they feel they can now stop it is through rising up and doing these types of acts. So if people are persuaded, they're convinced of a cause, they said to Jesus, the disciples came to Jesus and said, we saw some people casting out demons in your name, and we forbid them because they were not following us. We forbid them, Jesus. These are the people that are casting out demons in your name, that are doing things in your name. We forbid them, Jesus, because they're not somehow attached to the group of the apostles and us, Jesus, right now. And he says, do not forbid them. He said, because no one's going to do something good in my name, and they're not going to be against us. they're on our side then. Whether you have contact here, whether they filled a membership card, Jesus said to his men, if they believe in our cause so much that they're going to use my name to do other things, Jesus said, that's the gospel. That's how we're spreading the message of the kingdom of God, man. And so in that example I'm giving you, I'm not comparing terrorism to that, but in that example I'm showing you whether or not people in this country have direct contact with ISIS or a membership card or any of these things, if they're persuaded of a cause and they're so convinced and so persuaded and they then swear allegiance to that cause, whether they ever have contact with any of the heads of that organization. It just so happened that the recent incident, they did have contact, but even if they didn't, that's terrorism, okay? And when I watch it, I wanted to just comment a short video on this because there's an update, because that's where we're at right now. That's where the country's debating. If we had more gun control, if we had more, and John, are you pro-gun or anything? I'm neither. I own a gun, but I just bought it many years ago, and so I have one. But it's not an issue. There are legitimate points to be made on each side. The points of the gun control issue, the guns. I remember watching a U2 video, the group from Bono. I saw it years ago. But on one of the videos, it simply had, during the song, I forget which song it is, but it had a little child, and I think it was a real video, not like something they made for the music video, and he was just pulling a gun out of a paper bag. He was like maybe 4-year-old kid, just pulling it out. But what it showed you was, the intent of that was to say, if certain weapons were not real readily available and people could get their hands on them, certainly that would play a role in stopping violence. And I do hear both sides. They say, well, I could go kill people with a spoon. Or look, when people do acts of violence, when people commit suicide, they could commit suicide or kill another person with a spoon, I grant it, with a knife or a fork. But it'd take a lot longer, and they might not always succeed, and it'd be a lot harder. But when people break in radical mind, and there's weapons available, it makes it a lot easier, okay? So that's the point that the pro-gun control side give, and that's a legitimate point. And I understand the other sides as well, that in this case, terrorists are not going to obey laws. Obviously, criminals are, that are breaking laws, robbing stores, shooting people. Obviously, they're not concerned about a gun law because they're breaking laws at the times they do this. So we all have points when we come to this table, but the difficulty in our country is we're polarized. We're polarized. And when I saw that one video of the man being interviewed, and he said, how could this supposedly normal, wonderful Muslim couple with a 6-month-old child, how could they ever think? He was superimposing his values, American values, upon them, and not understanding, which would be the American values that, in a sense, he was superimposing on them was, you just live a nice life. And that man, he made like $50,000 to $70,000 at the job where he worked, where the shooting took place, actually. And the guy that was being interviewed said, this is what it's all about. You had the life, you had the money, you had the vehicles, but he became convinced that there was some other cause that was greater than that life, than that whole American dream. That's why he did that. That's why people rise up and do things. That's why people say we're going to revolt against England, the crown, because we believe there are certain things, certain values that are worth dying for. We have that famous thing, give me liberty or give me death. But the point I'm making is, People become convinced of a certain cause. And if you can shape something into a cause, see the abortion issue, or the pro-gay rights things, and all these things, many sincere people are pro-abortion. They say pro-choice, but many are for abortion because they see it. They're honestly convinced that it's more of a cause for women's rights. They see it. It's been shaped as a cause for the rights of other people. But what they don't see is the rights of the most simple right for that child to live, which the pro-life side will say our Constitution itself guarantees the right to life. Our founding Bill of Rights and documents, they guarantee the right to life. So if you understand that one simple issue, then you can be persuaded whether, oh, I see now. Am I right in my, cause, or am I wrong? But when you shape a cause and you begin to view it as it's a rights issue, it's a freedom of rights issue, and you begin viewing that you're defending the rights of women's health care. I want women to get health care. But surely we don't have to, fund an organization that does most abortions in the country. We don't have to keep funding them when that's really the primary. The other good things they do can be done by other things. And you would never justify a very hideous, wicked thing in order to say, well, because they do other good things, which they do other good things in the area of women's health care. But we can't just say we can't overlook the bad that's done. So this is just an update. I'll do the little video, the other one I mentioned. This is for the weekend. Today is Saturday, okay? And then I got a teaching one called The Creed, and I videotaped that one yesterday in the cathedral church, or the day before. I was inside the cathedral, so you get to see all the pretty stained glass and everything, and you'll see that probably tomorrow. The Lord bless thee and keep thee. The Lord make his face shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace. God bless.